our virtual workforce webinar series. And today we are going to be talking about managing remote teams effectively. Please allow me just to do a couple of items. Allison, if you could switch to the next slide or the previous slide. So like everything else that we do, the organization is always supported by our sponsors, especially events like that, regardless of the fact that we're doing webinars. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to Anthony Guzzo of Guzzo & Guzzo, Chris Schifano of Angie, and Bob Kilroy of Joule Electric, who are today's sponsors of this event. And can't thank you enough. Allison, you can unshare your screens now, and let me welcome everybody and say to you that today we have a really powerful presentation from Christopher Kirkos, who happens to be my son, in case you haven't noticed that, and his associate Matt, and they both are lead engineers at a company called Wanderoo, based out of Boston. And I thought it would be really good for them to share their story about Wanderoo and the growth of that company, because they've pretty much managed the entire growth of their company from a remote standpoint well before, it's going on a number of years, well before this pandemic. And so having addressed all those issues over a period of time, they've learned how to both manage the teams for accountability and manage the teams for efficiency, and to grow their company in many cases predominantly from a remote standpoint, even though they do have a headquarters based out of Boston. And so at this point in time, and I'll do some cleanup and some housekeeping at the end of the event, but let's get right into it this morning. So I'd like everyone to please welcome Christopher Kirkos. And hold on, Matt, I got to get your last name again. Where are you, Matt?
Matt Warren.
Yeah.
Matt Warren, thank you, buddy, from Wanderoo. So take it away, fellas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
For sure. All right, thank you guys for being here and for inviting us on to talk. Yeah, like my dad said, we've been a remote culture for a while now, and so we've managing this transition to fully remote has been seamless from our workflow perspective, and which has been really nice and interesting. So we figured we'd share some of those lessons with you today. Again, I'm Chris, principal engineer at Wanderoo, and Matt is director of engineering at Wanderoo. Matt spent probably a bunch more time than me focusing on these topics. He's basically been the person who introduced all of the remote technology from all of the things. If you've seen the new office that Dad created, that Jim created for bringing teams together in his office, and all the remote technologies and all that kind of stuff, Matt basically did all of that for us from the ground up, choosing all the technologies, and then also thinking about how do we do career progression, career ladders, and how do we do recruiting, and all that kind of stuff from with remote employees. We've got a few more people joining us, so that's good. So what we did was before this meeting, Matt and I brainstormed via a Google Doc, and we're sharing that with you. We're basically going to present from it, and so you can take a look at the chat room, copy and paste the link into a new tab in your web browser. How we like to work is, put the video on one side of the screen and the document on the other side of the screen, and you can collaborate with us as we go. And the reason we wanted to do it this way for the presentation is because this is how we hold meetings. We have our team in a room together. We have a collaborative Google Doc, and we're brainstorming and coming up with ideas. And before the meeting, whoever is leading the meeting puts together the outline, and so that everyone understands when they join the meeting, what is the goal? What are we trying to get through? And that lays the groundwork, and then everyone has a chance to add questions and whatnot. So I'm sure a lot of you have used Microsoft Word and track changes and things like that. And Google Docs works very similarly to that. It's just real time, and we use it all the time, because one of the one of the big challenges to remote work is how do you get that collaborative feel on a whiteboard that you would have? You'd sit down with your team and draw out stuff on a whiteboard, or sit next to somebody and have a pen and paper and have a conversation and come up with ideas and figure things out. And so Google Docs is one of the tools that allows us to maintain that workflow fully remotely. And so what we figured we would do is show you how we do that during our presentation today. So everyone can click that link. I'll also present it. I'll share that right now. There's a question at the top, and we'll fill it in. And whoever has access to the Google Doc from a computer and is able to participate, please participate. There's a question at the top, which is basically what are your current remote challenges and a little bit about you. And so if you can take one of those placeholder spots and fill it in, that'll be great. What we want to do is know what your challenges are so we know what to focus on in the presentation. So feel free to go to one of those placeholders at the top and fill in a little bit of information about you, what your remote challenges are. You don't have to be like Jim said, the video is being recorded, so you don't have to put your company name or any real names or anything like that in there. As we talk, we can be very generic. Like, we're dealing with how do I hold meetings properly? It's hard for us to collaborate on video. We don't know what video conferencing tool to use or whatever. Like, what are your current remote challenges? We'd like to know so we can spend some time on that.
Chris, why don't you share that? Why don't you share your screen and show them what that document looks like, and then those that can take it, you would just explain to them how they would copy that link into a Google browser.
Absolutely. So I shared my screen. Tell me if that doesn't look good. Does it look okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right. So yeah, like I said, we shared it in the chat, and the link in the chat, I'll post it one more time, and you can copy and paste that link. And what we like to do is, we'll put the video chat on the side, and we'll put the document on the other side on my desktop, and we'll be able to see both the document and each other and collaborate like we're collaborating on a whiteboard. And so while we do that, and fill out, please help me fill out that first question. While we do that, Matt will tell us a little bit about the Wanderer story and how we got to where we are now and the decisions that we made to become a remote first culture, and all of our challenges and along the way. And then we'll get into some of the specific details after that. So go for it, Matt.
Cool. Yeah. So I've been at Wanderer for almost 7 years now, which means I get to talk about the history because I've been doing this longer. But it's when I joined, it was a pretty small group. We were all based in Boston. We're all very close. I think I just slipped under the cutoff for single-digit employee numbers. So I maybe was number 9, but that was 2013. And I don't know if folks were in the Northeast area for that winter of 2013 into 14, but we had that ridiculous slew of snowstorms that kept everybody home for like a couple of weeks or something like that, at least in the Boston area. That was sort of the first time where we realized, remote work really served a useful purpose. And so, we had to adapt to using, at the time, Google Hangouts. And we then started to understand how to present screens and use both the Hangout video and Hangout chat to hold discussions and things like that. Later that year, 2014, we had our first engineer say, I'm going to move across the country. He was dating somebody who was moving and said, want to move with them. And we said, well, we don't want to lose that talent. And so how can we make this work? And, well, okay, we have all of these tools with Google, and at that point we had brought in a chat program called HipChat, no longer available, but it was our first attempt at allowing people to have what we call asynchronous communication. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I was the first engineer to move. After that, I think we've had 3 or 4 other folks do the same thing. So it turns out that in order to have the talent that we want, it helps to be flexible on how people work and what we expect from them if they're not in the office. So in addition to those kinds of engineers, we also had a need to bring in some external folks. This was an overseas company. They were offset by 11 hours. So there was no chance to sort of sync up with them at the end of our day because they were maybe just waking up. We had a little bit of overlap, an hour or two every morning. And so we discovered that, okay, if you can develop a system of communication where these folks can say, hey, we're running into this trouble, this thing doesn't look right, I need some help, whatever. If they are allowed to say that, and we spend some time in our next day helping them through whatever those struggles were, and empowering them to get the information that they need, they would be able to work more efficiently. So that was sort of the second step for us. The final step in sort of this journey to understand remote work and whatnot was then hiring people who were not in the Boston area anymore. And that was a really interesting challenge because once you have people on board and they're familiar with how your company works and your company culture and all those kinds of things, they can transition to, well, I'll do those same things, just not in a room with everyone. But hiring someone presents its own set of challenges. How do you evaluate that this person is a good, not only employee, but a remote employee as well? Are they motivated, highly self-motivated? Are they good communicators? And are they not just going to get stuck on a problem and just sit there and spin all day? Will they voice any issues and get feedback when they need it? We were lucky to, I think our first remote hire led our data engineering team, and he had done remote work for a long time. He lives in upstate New York, and he helped solidify a lot of what we were doing and provided a lot of feedback of like, hey, when you're running a meeting, it would help if this thing, that thing. People who are in the office have, I don't know, an extra monitor or whatever the thing was. I'm making some of this stuff up, but he'd come into the office and visit and see things and be like, oh, that would be a cool thing if we could also do that for remote employees. So that helped us a lot. And, we were able to continue to grow a data engineering team with almost entirely remote folks. I don't know that we had any folks in the office for a while for that team. And that workflow continues to serve us well now, where everybody sort of has to be remote. Chris, I think you want to talk a little bit about the week. Folks have filled in a little bit here. I'm going to try to read while you talk.
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everyone for participating. This is great. Like I said before we started this meeting last week, this is exactly what Matt and I did. We started this document. We started putting our ideas down and organizing our thoughts. And it's like sitting next to each other. And so what we're going to do is we're going to fill in for each other as we go as well. And so you'll see a little bit how we collaborate. So yeah, our week. So that was the backstory about how we got to where we were, to where we are now, and how, even though right now we're in this situation where we're being forced to be remote, and I just want to recognize up front that this is a very different situation than normal, because normally we'd have a lot of advice about, here's how you do this dual remote thing where we have people in the office and people outside of the office, and how do you bring them in? How do you make the outside people feel like they're in, and all of this kind of stuff. But now we've kind of all been forced into this new situation, and we're also learning as we go, in terms of being fully remote.
Chris, let me interrupt you a second, if I may. I think you brought up a point here that there's going to come a point in time in the not so distant future as offices begin to open up when I think it's going to be a 50-50 kind of office, some remote, some in office, probably for a good amount of time. So feel free to touch on not only everybody remote, but also how do you connect those that are in office to those that are out of office? Because I think that's going to be a scenario.
Nice. Yeah, that's very true. We have a lot of people, we did surveys, and that's one of the lessons that I hope everyone takes from this. Talk to your people and survey and get feedback. I think that's the number one thing. We did a few surveys, and we realized that there's a certain percentage of people who really need to go back to the office because they don't have a good work environment at home or whatever. And they just need that kind of communication and structure. And there are other people who are finding it, they love working remotely and they're super productive and they have a more flexible schedule, whatever else. And so I think you're right. I think we're going to be in that split world. We do have a lot of experience with that, so everyone should feel free to ask us questions. The other thing, if you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat. We'll stop periodically, or you can just raise your hand and say, hey, I have a question as we go. There's also a question section all the way at the bottom that I filled in one question. You guys are welcome to fill in more. Please fill this section here at the bottom with questions as you think of them, and we'll definitely address them as we go, or any other topics that you want us to touch on as we get to the end. All right, so continuing with Wander's story, we're going to break down what our week looks like so that everyone can see our workflow. Again, this stuff is more geared towards a tech company, but I think the agile methodologies that we use and the tools and the structure that we put in place actually good for probably a lot more than just tech companies. And I believe a lot of people have taken those ideas and moved and incorporated them into their workflows. So like stand-ups, I'm sure a bunch of people do stand-ups, but that's, stand-up comes from the technology lifecycle. And so Monday morning, this is what our week looks like. We start every Monday morning, 10:30, video chat, whole company, everyone's included, numbers and stats for the week right up front. Here are some company updates. Here's exactly how we did last week. Here's the good and the bad. And here's some status on projects. And we go and we kind of summarize everything. There's very open and transparent communication. It is a chance for people to see exactly the status of the company, where we're at. And what we find is, particularly in this scenario, but in general, the transparency is something that brings people in. And bringing people in is one of the harder challenges of being remote. And it's giving someone a handshake or a hug feels like they're in here, overhearing a conversation, seeing the mood of the office. You don't get those things as much, and so trying to recreate that a little bit and bringing people in to make them feel like they have agency and they're a part of the company and have a beat on how the company's doing and how that really brings them in. So we start our week with that update. After that, we have the way that our company is structured is that we break up into what we call pods, which are focused teams of diverse talents. And so instead of it being, the HR team spends time with HR and customer service and tech and technology and mobile and data and stuff like that, and they're all like in their own silos. We have cross-functional teams. So we have a team that's focused on a goal. And so our goal might be, bring new users into the fold. And the people who are associated with that, there'll be people who will be designers, product managers, engineers. So it's a very cross-functional group. And so right after our Monday meeting, we break out into our cross-functional groups, and we do sprint planning, basically. What did we accomplish last week? Did anything interrupt us? What do we intend on accomplishing this week? Sometimes teams do a week sprint. Sometimes teams do a 2-week sprint. Also, if any terminology is unfamiliar to you, just let me know. A sprint is kind of a chunk of work where an incremental iteration of work, basically. We have a project, we estimate it's going to probably take a month, 2 months, whatever it is. A sprint is what are we going to get done during this chunk of work, and then we can plan for the next. And so that just gives us a quick cycle of an iterative cycle. We do stand-ups, basically, and stand-ups are basically, it depends on the team. Sometimes we do it every day. Sometimes some people do them in chat, so we use Slack. Some people do it every single day. Some people do it twice a week. It really depends on the team needs. Again, survey your team and figure out what works. I think the major important parts of stand-up we've tried to deprioritize stand-up being a status check-in. That can be accomplished on other ways. Stand-ups for us are really a way to identify blockers and a way to facilitate communication when it's needed. So if people need to talk about something, but they haven't yet identified that, we really find a way to identify that during stand-up. And so when it devolves into just a status update, then it goes into one ear and out the other. It's really just a way to your status updates you'd rather happen in a group focused setting where you're talking about tasks, not really in a stand-up where you want to identify blockers and help people move forward. And let's see, Friday show and tell. So we do every Friday. We do some sort of show and tell of here's an interesting thing we built this week or over the past few weeks or something like that. Sometimes we even do other kinds of topics, like someone's going to talk about gardening this week and whatever else. It's really just it's a way for us to show off interesting things that we're doing. Sometimes they're very personal when we don't have a specific technical topic to cover. Sometimes not. And it's also a way for us to boast to other people, to boast other people what teams are doing, which is nice. And then finally, we do manager one-on-ones. Hopefully everyone's doing one-on-ones. If not, we think it's really important. It's a way for you to check in with your employee. Again, it's not a status meeting. It's not give me status on your project. A one-on-one is I'm a manager to an employee on an individual basis. How are you doing? What are your current challenges? How can I help? Those kinds of topics. And you'll get more of a personal communication feel during your one-on-ones, and they're really all about just helping make that person productive. And then that's basically what we do for meetings. Everything else is ad hoc. The one thing I think is really important for meetings is when you hear ambiguity that in people's voices, then set up a meeting with them and other people to try to suss that out. And it takes a keen eye to understand, to see when ambiguity is happening. And you can tell sometimes from maybe somebody's stand up or from the daily, from an update, status update or something like that, that someone might not know how to proceed with something. And so remote, it's really important for you to be able to identify blockers and schedule meetings quickly with each other in order to understand that. One of the ways that you can do that is by having video conference calls like this one. You can see on someone's face, you can hear their voice, right? That context is really important. And that gives you a sense of, is this person just focused on making progress and is quiet, or are they actually struggling on something and they don't know how to ask for help? And so you want to be able to identify that, and having the video chat really helps. So every single one of the meetings that I mentioned so far is on a calendar, with calendar invite and has a automatic video conference link attached to it. And we've kind of established the culture that every single meeting that we have is a video chat just like this one. And we've been doing that for years now, actually. Matt created some technology in the office, and every single time we had an in-office meeting, the video call was on so that remote folks could join. And that's just been our workflow and our culture, and that's really paid off. So every single meeting we have is like that. Go ahead.
Chris, I have this is Anthony Guzzo. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Sorry I was a few minutes late jumping on. I was just on another call. But, I think you brought up a good point, just what you said a few minutes ago. I think that face-to-face is important, and actually jotted it down as one of my obstacles right now. We're kind of more graphic, and being there face-to-face is not going to happen these days. So, when we're doing something simple as sharing our screen and marking things up, it is important that I think to have that visual. So, and again, I don't know if it's just us not being as familiar with some of the technology part, because we do use Teams, but maybe some other programs do it better. I see that here you're sharing the screen, and I see videos and I see everyone here, and I can kind of get that feedback, because I think that's kind of what we miss sometimes in our calls.
Yeah, that's we like to say the right tool for the problem, right? And sometimes you have to experiment with it. We struggled when everybody went remote. We had a real big struggle with Google Meet. So everything we have is tied around the Google suite of applications. So everything's in Gmail and all that. But we took a hard look at using Zoom for exactly this. It's much easier to see everybody with a presentation happening. We ended up not going with it because Meet has made some adjustments since then to improve that. But it might be a situation where you may just need to experiment with something to go alongside Teams. I personally have not used Teams. I'm not sure what the experience looks like. But you start to see some of these things in other other webinars or anything like that. And I think now is a great time to experiment with that stuff. A lot of these tools, they have some sort of free plan or a preview, of like the standard paid version for folks to experiment with.
Anthony, if I can ask you, because I thought I saw you typing out part of your comments earlier about sharing an architectural plan. Is that so? You're marking up some architectural plans, and maybe the format that you need has got to be conducive to the file format of the actual plan. Is that what is the format of your architectural plans? Because they tend to be very graphic heavy, right? And they're big files because there's so many layers.
Yeah, exactly. What we've done is we try to really narrow it down to a PDF. So we'll take whatever drawing or program that we're working in, and we'll just export out a PDF, make it easy for everyone. We can share it. We can email it if they want to look at it ahead of time. And what we're doing is we're just sharing our screen. And like Chris brought up, I really think that's kind of the one piece that I feel that I'm missing, is that kind of connection when I'm talking to a client. Amongst us, I think as a team, we lose a little bit, but I think as a client, it's really just try to express and go back and forth and walk them through a drawing. It's just not the same. And again, it's just something that maybe we need to play around with more to really get a feeling of maybe it's just we're not using the right program for what we're trying to do here. So maybe it's trial and error. I just, that's one of the obstacles that I think we're facing.
Yeah, I think experimentation is important in this case. Experimenting with a few different technologies. We'll go through an experimental phase every now and then, like Matt was saying. Is Zoom a better option for us or not? And we'll try it out and we'll prototype it. And so just have that experimentation mindset. Like, it's easy to collaborate on this document because the technology is there. It's going to be harder to do it on those other specialized formats. That's definitely
Yeah,
something.
I think what we were struggling with is like, okay, we're going to dedicate to one program and Teams, and that's what we're going to use. And I think I got, I think our whole office got a little bit too locked into that, where we're just saying, okay, let's do the best job we can in Teams without really looking elsewhere.
Anthony, I think too, if I can interject, we're going through the same thing. We were using for all of these webinars. So our voice over IP was Ring Central, and Ring Central has a Zoom back end for these video chats, and we actually may be moving over to Teams because we're finding out there's a couple of elements of Teams. I also suspect, everyone, that every one of these platforms are going to be upgraded in the short term because so many people will be using them. I think Google will continue to do it. I think Microsoft will do it. I think Zoom will continue to do it. And I would say transmit your concerns about what you're not able to do with your documents to them, right? And because that's going to help each one of these software tools be able to add the elements that's going to make this remote work easier for all different industries, because it makes a difference.
Got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the feedback is really important. As software developers, if you don't say, we're struggling to do this thing with your program, we'll never know, oh, maybe that's a thing that we should try to go solve. I'm trying to come up with a solution where you can at least show an image and have people draw on it on the same time. And I don't know what would provide that for you, because I think that might help a little bit, but yeah, I don't know that I have a great recommendation off the top of my head.
I can comment on Teams. Also, wait, I'm echoing here.
You're muted.
Mike, you muted. You muted yourself, Mike. Hold on. Go ahead, Mike.
You know what the problem is? I can't hear my phone. I can't hear myself think. Okay, hang up.
Okay, go ahead.
What's happening is we use Teams as a communication platform. We chat. We have video calls. We have a fair amount of contemporaneous work. We've got network-capable spreadsheets and documents, similar to the Google that we're looking at here. We can use Microsoft Word. We can use any of the Microsoft platforms, project, whatever it is. I don't know about using a graphic type program. We can tie whatever it is into that. What I'm liking, I just found out that we're capable of doing, is we can sync those files and work that stuff real time into the SharePoint platform that we have back, as part of our overall company network, and it's working like a champ compared to trying to do things in isolation. I was having trouble with sync. What do you call it? Skype. We had a lot of Skype issues. We got rid of that platform. We're on Teams now, dedicated, and it seems to be providing a lot of value with the remote location that everybody has to work in. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thanks.
Thank you.
And you said that's SharePoint where you're sharing the files, right?
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
All right, back to you guys.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for those questions. Yeah, so some of the important technologies that we leveraged during our week. One of the heavy hitters for us is the team calendar. All right, so we have a shared calendar, and the shared calendar is really important. Everyone's calendar is open for everyone to see, to help each other schedule meetings and things like that. If it's not a specific one-on-one kind of a meeting, there's a team calendar, and so everyone's subscribed to their own calendar, and everyone's subscribed to the team calendar. The team calendar sets a lot of expectations, which what are your working hours? Some people have different schedules now when they're working home and you're taking shifts with the kids, and that's okay. And we just need to know when we should be scheduling meetings and when we can expect to communicate live with somebody. When are they going to be off? When are they taking vacation? When are they available and unavailable? And that's the expectation that we've set with everybody, and everyone communicates that by marking it on the team calendar. So that's really, really important for us. And we can just go there and at a glimpse, see, Matt's got this block of time blocked off. I can't schedule something for him then. Where should I put this? I'll schedule for a particular day or something like that. And that's a really easy workflow for us to use. The other technology that's really important for us is Slack. Slack is the main way that we communicate during the day. If we're not on a video call, we're on Slack, and we're very deliberate about our tool use. And that, I think, is really one of the lessons that I want to talk to people about, is what that we learned is be deliberate about your workflow and your tool use. Some of these tools will constrain you and keep you locked in. Like you said, someone might have Teams or someone might have Skype or something like that, and your workflow will be dictated by what the capabilities of the tool are. And instead, try to flip that around and say, this is the workflow that I need. What tools can support that? Right. And so just try to be a little more deliberate about that. So we're deliberate about how we use our communications. Like I said, every meeting has a video chat. During the day, we have Slack, and Slack we try to, as much as possible, communicate in public rooms that are categorized by some topic. So we don't want to get too granular on topics, so that we're not all spread thin, looking at different chat rooms and sitting and chat all day. But we want to be able to communicate in a way that is specific to a topic and can inform a larger group without having to just communicate over email or something like that. Honestly, a lot of our email communication is really like notifications and external communications. We don't communicate with each other by email at all. It's a little too slow and clunky. We're looking for a much quicker iterative communication loop than that, and we use Slack for that. Slack is also nice in that, or chat is also nice in that it's kind of like the time frame is sometime maybe within the next hour or two, max someone will get back to you, versus email could be all day, next day, that kind of thing. And so it just provides that form. The integrations are also really, really key for us. We have tools. We use Jira for issue tracking, and so we have a tool that helps us track what are the current things that we're working on, what are the issues that we need to focus on, what are the priorities, and that gives us a way of figuring out what we should work on next, and it provides context around the problem. And so we have integrations with Jira so that and our tools so that they show up in Slack and can provide context around the conversation, and that's pretty important. So I think it's important for people to be able to track their issues. It's really important for us, and to have a conversation that's isolated to that issue, and so that people who care about that issue will follow and track it, and that's really useful for us. Go ahead.
There was just one question that came in specifically about Slack. I'm getting a bunch of questions. We'll definitely try to get through them all, but this one particularly relevant. So has our use of Slack changed over time? And I can say definitely yes. Chris, I don't remember if you were around when we first actually started using Slack. We started using it when we brought in the external staffing company, because we didn't fully onboard them as members of the company. And so they didn't have access to our HipChat rooms at the time, and HipChat guest channels didn't keep any history around. So we let them use Slack, which kept the conversation there. It was much easier to respond, those kinds of things. The other Slack change that we've made more recently was to actually close a bunch of channels. It was like we had maybe 3 channels for every Wanderoo employee. It was sort of really crazy. So we condensed a bunch of things down and tried to keep, channels a little more generalized, rather than like, oh, this very specific thing is happening here, because it was just too difficult to try to find what that thing was, who should be there, and what messages should go in there. but in general, I think for me personally, I really like chat. I think it's super useful, way more than email and all those kinds of things. So I don't feel like my habits have changed, but I've definitely seen other people adapt to putting messages in Slack and using Slack reminders and things like that rather than sending an email. Follow-up question: archive or close? Archive. I don't know that we've ever deleted a channel. This is actually really important. Slack, if you pay for it, it keeps all of your history forever, and so it then also becomes a documentation tool where you can search for some words and say, geez, when was that time we were talking about signing this new partner, whatever the thing is. I'll punch in, we just signed blah, blah, blah. And, there it is, and we talked about, the specifics of all those kinds of things. So my final plug for Slack is they are definitely one of the ones that's allowing, sort of free tier customers to get the subscription experience right now. So you get to test out some of those features. And I definitely encourage people to use that. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I use it on a different project. I use it to bring external customers in as well. So you can invite. A really nice feature is to be able to invite external parties into only specific rooms. So you give them kind of access to your Slack and connect them to your Slack, but they're scoped to just that one room. And now you have a direct communication channel during the day with an important partner. And this has been pretty important for us. And in a side project actually that I'm working on, where we are in daily conversations with a partner, but they're not a part of our company. And but it's really important for us to have that tight workflow of like, hey, here's something that I want you to check out, or a question that I need answered, and I want to be able to respond to that quickly and not have that long email kind of correspondence. I want to be able to just unblock them immediately. And that gives me an opportunity to do that. What else? Google Docs is important for us. Like as we see here, every single meeting that we have has Google Docs with meeting notes in it, and so we're either tracking what we want to talk about on a given meeting, or we're brainstorming with each other on this. So we use Google Docs. There's a link, and we create the calendar invite. It's got the link to the video chat, and it's got the link to the document for that meeting. And we're always collaborating in there. So a lot of our meetings, if we have a status meeting or something like that, and there's nothing to talk about, there's nothing in the document in terms of topics that we need to cover, we cancel the meeting. Right? We don't need to host that meeting. We don't have to waste people's time. So we use it as a tool to stay on point during our meetings. And that's really important to us.
Chris or Matt, can you just simply, I know you put it into the document, which is great, and frankly, I love what we're doing with this document. It's working out great. And for those of you that are on the chat, that are on this call, if you're not seeing everything that's on there, we'll make sure you get the link to the document afterwards so you can look at it in its entirely, because both Chris and Matt are adding to the notes as we're going along here. But could you talk about what Jira is real quick? And because I don't even know what that is and how you use it.
Yeah, sure. So Jira is an issue tracking tool, and a lot of people will use something like Trello, or I'm not sure how people track what they're currently actively working on. But what we do is Jira it's mostly focused on software engineering. So I think there are other tools for other use cases that are better. But for us, it's really important for when a customer notices an issue, we get to log it in Jira and we get to prioritize it. Should we interrupt this sprint with this new issue? What is its priority? So it gives us the ability to organize things that we want to do, work tasks into groups, and then schedule them, prioritize and schedule them, and then also have a conversation around them to discuss how we should solve the problem. And so this is a very frequent a tool for us to use. We're in it every single day. All of the changes that we ever make to the system are tracked in this tool, where we can always go back and see what we did and why we did it. So yeah, it's just a task prioritization tool. What's actually really nice about it too is that some people are better in conversation and some people are better in written form. And it's when you don't have the conversation part anymore, and it's really important to give people the tools that can provide the right feedback to you, especially when you're as a manager, you're trying to make sure that people are making progress and things are going well, organized. And it's harder to do that when you're fully remote. And so a tool like Jira gives you that understanding of, once you have a habit of using it, and everyone in the company is kind of using it, you can keep a beat on what people are doing, what projects are actively being worked on, and tasks are making progress. If someone has a question, it's going to be associated with the issue and in the issue, and they're going to tag you and that kind of stuff. And so it facilitates that understanding of what's being worked on and whatnot. So really, task status checking is really done through the tool. We don't really do that as much in conversation.
It's also useful for prioritization. Everything has its own priority. When we talk about what to do for the week or for a sprint, we say, okay, let's move this to the top of the list. Let's move this thing down. It's taking too long, or something like that. So from a project management perspective, it's also useful for those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we're actually my team, we're actually thinking about the priority. What's the priority items to our workflow? We're working differently and we're working in a different environment, and so we need to prioritize the programs and the tasks and the things that we do here at the chamber. And so some things that were a priority 2 months ago may be priority 5 when 3 other things are above that. We need to track that as a group. So it's a good point. Thank you for sharing that, guys.
There's some alternatives too. There's a tools section to the doc that's a little bit lower down. There are a couple alternatives that I put out there. Trello is a good, just like real basic. You have a card. It has a description on it. You can move it from one column to the next. So that's a good way to start. Jira has all sorts of customizations that you can do. It's a great way to sink a lot of time and not actually accomplish anything if you're just wanting to get up and running with a system.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Sure. Jira is definitely a power tool. I don't recommend it unless you're doing software engineering, but it's nice to find something that will help you keep status and prioritize. That's been really good. And I think the important part is to establish a workflow around it, establish expectations around it. So we have expectations established about whenever you're making a change, you're linking it to an issue. Every single change is linked to an issue. So there's a way to talk about it. And that's just the culture that we have, and that's what we do. And so establishing that workflow is important. And so if someone's working on a task, there should be a Trello card for it. Right? You're just establishing and communicating that expectation of that. And then you have kind of swim lanes of what's the phase of that task or something like that. So break it out into a tool. All right, let's jump to the next thing. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we're gonna might go through a little bit quick this last bit. But Matt, tell us a little bit about communication patterns.
And Matt, before you jump in, let me just say this. So yes, you're right. We try to keep this to an hour. There's a lot to talk about here, and I don't know if you guys can spend a few extra minutes or not after 12 for anybody that can stay that needs to ask a follow-up question. So let's try to get it down to the 10 minutes, but we'll keep the line open for a little bit longer if both you and Matt are able to for a few minutes and answer any follow-up questions that for anybody that needs to. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. So, communication, we keep talking about it. We keep talking about the different things that we're trying to do in order to keep communication going. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, if I'm reading in a little bit to to what everybody's writing in their questions, in the questions that we asked of everybody. So I broke it down here into two different types of communication, the asynchronous type and the synchronous type. So asynchronous, right? It's Slack, Teams, email. And for folks who are used to having everybody in an office and it's a small group of people, you're probably really not used to having, delays in communication. But especially now, this is sort of the most important type of communication to embrace. Everybody's at home, and you have to be cognizant of how that changes workflows. People have dogs or kids, or I am not going to try to think of other examples, but you need to be flexible with working hours and those kinds of things. So the point is, when there's something on your mind, when there's something that you need to talk to somebody else about for upcoming work, you can shoot off an email. If you're using Slack or Teams or Skype or anything like that, drop in a message there, and set an expectation with people like, hey, check in on this stuff every so often, throughout the day. Answers don't have to be immediate, but if there's sort of a wrap up to the end of the day, where people can answer some of these questions and make sure there are no loose ends, then that gives everybody the freedom and flexibility to have intense focus time for an hour, or make sure that they're going out for a walk at lunch to get outside the house, and it eases that transition of going from everybody all together at an office to everybody trying to replicate that in some way at home. The other note that I put here is, and certainly maybe it's more of a software engineering thing, but you have employees who are a little more introspective, a little more introverted. They, when you're sitting next to them, you're like, hey man, what do you think about this thing? And they'll tell you. But if you have them on a group call like this, they're not going to say anything, because, they want to think about it, and somebody else speaks up before them. They say, yeah, that's a pretty good, explanation or answer or whatever. And so their thoughts may not come out. But if you leave a message, on a Jira ticket or a Trello card or in Slack, they'll see that and go, oh yeah, and type a few things and give you a response that maybe you wouldn't normally get. But sometimes synchronous communication is really important, really necessary. So our Monday all hands, it's a time for us to talk about the company, and it's really important, especially in the situation we're in now, to be able to say, like, this is a good success for us. This is a thing that we need some help with. We want everybody to be there and active and engaged in those things. So we have those large group meetings to say, like, here's the rundown. So that's usually our agenda, is those things that Chris talked about for those meetings, and try to encourage people to submit questions ahead of time. What we can't demonstrate super well on this document, because you're all logged in as anonymous users, but I can say, Kirkos, right? How do you want to do that? And then this is just a task right in a document. Chris will get an email or a Slack notification that he's been tagged in a comment, and he'll go, oh, I'll write some more thoughts here, or he'll flesh it out with some more points. And so that's something I had to do with my team for ahead of meetings. I would just go in and tag a few people to get the conversation started. And then once you have everybody together, you can say, hey, great, you had this really useful example. Can you give a little more detail there, or any of those kinds of things. And then from there it becomes this sort of iterative process of like, okay, Jim hasn't said much today. That's a little strange and unexpected for him. Let me have a one-on-one with him and say, okay, how are things going? And you say, this seemed like your area of expertise. You didn't say anything. What's going on? And he'll say, yeah, I'm focused on this other thing that's totally irrelevant. So, oh, okay, right, that makes sense. Or he'll say, geez, you know what? Like I'm just not getting work done. And then that's, a different kind of conversation to say like, all right, cool. What's that about? I have a college student who's working with me right now. And when we switched from office to fully remote, she just like shut down for 3 weeks. And I was like, oh, crap. I finally got her to a place last week where I was like, all right, when was the last time you went outside? And she's like, I don't know. I sit out at the picnic table in my backyard. I'm like, no, don't do that. Like, go for a walk, get out. And immediately the next day, she's like, I went for a walk yesterday. I feel fantastic. Here we are. We're back at it, so that it takes practice. It takes time to understand, how these things are going, but you can encourage people to communicate in these different ways. And the last type of synchronous communication, especially relevant right now, is social stuff. And so get people together, because maybe you used to have beers in the office, and now you can't, but everybody probably has a beer kicking around at home. And so you sit down, get everybody on a Zoom or Hangout or anything like that, and talk about random stuff. I think we put some links down the bottom for games that people can play just right in your browser with your coworkers and all those kinds of things. So we do that a couple times a week, and we call it Wine Hour. Not everybody has wine, but it seemed like a good name at the time. And we try not to talk work, and that's the most important thing. Is like you have this clear separation of just like, we're just hanging out. Not going to talk about the upcoming contract or this, that, the other thing. We're just going to play a game, and that's pretty wonderful.
Yeah, let me add on the one-on-one thing. I had a few different employees, especially when we transitioned to fully remote, who didn't know how to create structure for themselves. And so like working hours or like some flow to their day at all, which for me is incredibly important. Like waking up at a specific time, getting a workout in, starting work, taking lunch at a specific time, like taking care of myself as I'm working fully remotely. And don't make the assumption that people know how to do that. Like help them do that in their one-on-ones. That's one of the lessons that I found from my one-on-ones. Was I had to help people figure out, how are you going to get a workout in? You should go to the gym. Are you going to do anything now or not? How are you going to, what kind of nutrition are you having? Help them get that. Because if they don't have those basics down, then they can't be productive for you and, or for themselves. And so talk to them about those things.
Yeah.
Guys, that is awesome. This conversation, I think we could probably do for a significant amount of time. It is 1:00. You guys did answer some questions, but why don't we open up the mic? And I'd appreciate if you would continue to take some notes on this, because I think this document is going to be very valuable to a lot of people, and maybe we'll even post it in some way for those that log on to watch this after today. So that they can have this document as well. But let's open up the mics for a couple of questions. If you could stay on. Matt and Chris, are you both okay for another few minutes?
Yep. Yeah, totally.
All right. So for those of you that are on the call, open up your mics if you want to ask a specific question, and you drop off as you need to, and hang on if you can.
I think we can do just the three that have come in. I threw in a couple that came from from the chat. So we'll just knock these off just to
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So what makes you effective at home personally? A lot of the stuff that Chris hinted to. I try to keep my normal commute, right? I take the dog to the dog park. I wake up at the same time, or that's out of order. I wake up at the same time, take a shower, take the dog to the dog park. And instead of going to the T to go into downtown Boston, I walk home and I come into my office, I put on some music, and I sign on for the day. I work, come up to lunch, take the dog out again, come back, have some lunch, and work to the end of the day. I'm less good about having a finite end to my day, but that's not really new. It's not like I left the office every day at 5 or 6 or anything like that. It was just sort of like, that's enough for today. I'm going to go home now. But that's the stuff that's made it feel like work and not, sitting here trying to get something done. Chris, I don't know if you have other suggestions.
Yeah, like for me, it was the structure. It's just having that structure to the day. That's really important for me. Actually taking a shower, getting dressed, and all of that kind of stuff. That's been like number one. The other thing is maintaining good nutrition, feeling healthy, right? Feeling well. It's easy to let that stuff go. It's easy to let your nutrition go, and that's been pretty key for me, is to keep that really strong, keep the workouts going and stuff like that. Yeah.
Go ahead. Let's go to the next question.
Office space, obviously. The office space is big, right? Having a dedicated work environment, right? So before you went to the office, and there's a lot of context and switching that's going to happen in your brain. Like, I'm in the office now. The walls, the pictures, the screens, the people, whatever. Like, now it's time for me to focus and do my thing. Yeah, I had to create that environment for myself at home too, and I think that's really important for everyone to try to have, is to have a place where when you go there, you turn on. Whether that's like you have some pictures and some things, and it reminds you this is your on time for working and being productive and helping people find that. Yeah, go ahead.
Good. Next, go to the next question.
All right. So, have you had any experience with Guru, Upwork, Transparent Business? I believe Guru and Upwork, these are outsourcing companies, right? I haven't done Transparent. I haven't had any experience particularly with them, but I do have experience with outsourcing companies. So, I'm guessing. I definitely want to know a little more context behind the question. Do we? Who asked it?
It was Michael Turner. You're still there? You
Yes.
go.
No, I'm still here. So as I understand those 3 platforms, and there are more, they are about remote workforce management as well as outsourcing. So you can get someone who shows that they have qualifications to write code for you in a software development, or if they can demonstrate that they have a PE license, they can design a bridge for you. And it's a way for you to collaborate. It's a way for you to share work and ideas in real time. And it's a way for managers to manage workflow, and, to have like the hangouts or sessions where, folks can ask questions, or they can monitor, like, where someone's going with a particular area. I think one of you guys might have been Matt that mentioned, somebody has a particular expertise, but you don't hear from them for a day or so. You can find out like kind of what they were doing, and maybe they were going down some rabbit hole and you want to call them and check in on them. Maybe they just, were inspired by some brilliance and worked for 48 hours straight. You don't know. So, those types of programs, like you guys mentioned, you have like 3 or 4 different programs to do what I believe those 3 platforms do under one banner.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds great, especially if they're not part of specifically your company. Right. So in this case, these are going to be employees or external.
Well, I mean, I know Guru and Upwork are freelancers. I mean, that's typically the way that their platform was developed. I know transparent business is more about monitoring your own employees and your own workflow product and everything, as well as freelancers if you give them access. I do know that there are other programs like Salesforce and stuff that do some of this stuff. I don't know if they have the same strengths in collaboration and like real time like collaboration for design or like coding or anything else like that I know transparent business does. And Guru, by the way. So anyway, there are other, as you guys have demonstrated here, there are so many that allow you to collaborate and stuff. But as I'm seeing with you guys, and with all due respect, Chris, your dad speaks very highly of you and all you've accomplished and stuff like that. I know you guys know all these different programs, but if for those of us that are more or not as up to speed on the technology, is there one place that allows us all the things that you guys are using multiple programs for?
Yeah, I think my recommendation to this question in general is write down what you need, what your workflow needs to be. And then instead of just like tool hunting and trying to find the perfect thing, just try to identify the minimal set of requirements to satisfy that workflow. Like I need to be able to communicate. I need to be able to get a response from somebody in an hour, or within an hour time frame, or any of those kinds of requirements. Try to nail down like the really important parts, and then find the simplest tool that can accomplish that, and leverage it. And simplest tool, simplest workflow. A lot of these ones that are all inclusive, all in one, the power tools, and sometimes you bite off more than you can chew with these things, or they'll limit you to what you can do because they don't support that feature yet, or something like that.
Gotcha.
So that's
Chris, but Chris, I'm going to follow up to Mike's question because I think I know where you were headed, Mike. And for those of us that are not used to actually doing the research or even knowing where to find these particular apps, so is it just that you take that shortened version of what you just said that Mike needed for his workflow and Google it, or is there a place that you could, or is there a place that you could go to find tools and apps for different types of needs? Because as we're researching these things and have to find it, I know that's definitely the case for me. It's easy for me. I can pick up the phone or I send you a note and say, "How do I find this?" And you tell me. Right? But what about everybody else? Right?
Yeah. So anytime I check out some of these tools, I end up saying, to a Google search for whatever the thing is, alternatives. And there are a few solutions out there, a couple of websites, that will give you just a listing of like, oh, you're trying to do this thing. Here's a bunch of things that do a very similar thing. So that's, generically speaking, that's not a bad research thing to do. And as somebody just said in the chat, if you're just starting out with this, don't try to get super complicated with it unless like you have hard requirements for a simple thing here. You can just say, let's see what this tool does. At the end of the day, a lot of these folks are trying to sell things, and they'll talk with you and sit down with you and say, yes, we can totally do this. That's going to be a little bit difficult. If you do it this way, this is how it works. So it is a little bit of experimentation with that.
All right, we have. Let's do one more, perhaps. Somebody with an iPad got their hand up. iPad 2.
That was me, Jimmy. Forget about it.
Okay, good. All right, so let's open up. Any last question? We're approaching 1:15. I don't want to abuse too much of everyone's time, especially Chris and Matt. This has been really informative. Any last question?
I'll just fill a little bit of space here at this last question about Yammer. We did use it. It was okay. I think it works really well if you have an exceptionally large company spread over like continents. For us, it didn't do very much because everything that we were posting in Yammer, we were posting in chat for the most part. So,
And Matt, for people's knowledge about Wanderoo, what was the height of the numbers of employees you had, and where are you now?
That's a great question.
Ballpark.
Yeah, I think we're in the 45-ish range to start the year.
Yeah, and I also think some of these specifics we shouldn't necessarily say and recorded. So
Fair point.
that's so we're not going to specifically talk about Wanderoo here, but just our experience.
Okay, that's fair. I wanted to give folks my intent was only to give folks the size of Wanderoo as a company. The 45 is the right kind of number, and numbers of people spread out remotely, and gives people a sense of how you operated and all the things you guys talked about earlier today.
Yeah. Like I said, we had a team that was outsourced across 10-hour different time zones, and they were like at least 6 to 10 people there, and then we had a bunch of people all across the U.S. from Washington to the Midwest and all the way to the East Coast and whatnot, even some up in Canada and whatever else. And so I think the most interesting part of all of that is trying to, when you look to support just one or two of those use cases, try to make it so that you're supporting it for everybody. Like you switch to remote first culture. Right? And that was really the important part for us, was like, if we needed to solve it for one person, we need to solve it for as many as we could possibly support. Like in order for the person who moved all the way out to Washington to feel like they were still a part of the team, we had to change our culture. And in doing so, we changed it and expanded.
Fantastic. Well, Matt, thank you so much for your time today. Chris, thank you for your time. This was great information. I love the way we utilized the Google Doc during the presentation. Everyone that's on the call, Allison will email everybody a link to the document once it's complete, and at the end of this. This recorded session will be posted to our media site, and as all of the virtual workforce webinars that we've been doing every Wednesday. As I said, this is the 5th. A little bit of housekeeping. We have a monthly membership meeting, which is going to be virtual for those that are on a call tomorrow morning. So please use the chamber calendar, and please refer to some of the new things that we've offered. The chamber has just launched a job board for those of you that need to post positions. It also has the ability for people to post resumes on that place as well for job seekers, and that's brand new. And so it's not populated a lot yet. We're going to work on that over the next 2 weeks, but that's a free tool to members. It'll save you a considerable amount of money. And we are advancing 2 very big projects. One is a health insurance program, and one is a piece of technology that we would introduce very soon, that has some really significant ways for us to solve some internal communication issues that we have between the chamber and its membership in a very secured in an instant way. And we'll be working on tidying them up and bringing them to you soon. And so, as always, visit the website if anyone needs help, or if you know of anyone needs help. COVID-19 help at meadowlands.org. That goes right to my email address. We will continue to provide you with continued information and as accurate of information as possible, so we can all weather this storm together. And thank you for your time and being with us today. And once again, Chris and Matt, thank you so much for your expertise and your willingness to share some time with us today. Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely, for sure.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You.
Awesome.